This is a video for paint. It's Paint Studio Level 1. So when you're starting with paint, obviously it's a good idea to get a smock. I will have a few over here. There should only be 4 or 5 people doing paint station. So there shouldn't be a whole lot of need for that. In the cupboards here we have our acrylics. They will all be pre-pumped for you. If for some reason they are running low, I think in the procedures video I explained how you can pump them in, but I'm going to do my best to try to make sure that they are filled for you, or that is a duty that we can give to the island dictator. When we're working with acrylics, you're welcome to get a variety of different brushes. You can get the sponge brush, which is on that, and an actual sponge as well. We also have our different types of brushes, and so you're going to want to experiment with a couple different styles of brushes and what they do. Also pay attention to the different how the bristles feel, because there are different brushes with different bristles and they will have different effects. Also get a palette knife and maybe one of these for water. If you're going to be mixing, probably, so I would grab a palette and I would grab a paper towel. All right, and you bring all of this over to your station. Oh, I think I forgot paper towel. Bring all of it over to your station, and you are welcome to get an experiment piece of paper, or you could do this in your sketchbook, but just keep in mind it's going to be wet and it's going to need to dry. So if you do it, make sure it's the last thing that you do, and then you can put your sketchbook on the drying rack if you need to. Okay, I'm not going to use all of these brushes today, but I want you to get an idea of the kind of brushes that we need. All right. The other thing that you might want to get are these inks. This is magenta and this is cyan, which have different mixing properties. So what we're doing is we're discovering different ways to create paint, because as you know, we only have our primary colors in here, and so how do we mix it? And so these are the different things that you're going to want to address. So when you are taking paint, one thing that you could do that might be easier, because the thing is we don't want these to mix. You want to make sure that you don't get other paint colors in these. So what I would do is maybe just take a little bit, and you only take what you need, okay? You don't need a ton, all right? But because we don't want to do more, this is why you have your water with you, and perhaps paper towel so you can wipe everything off. And maybe take a little bit of blue, right? I have about a dime or quarter size amount, and again, I'm rinsing this out in my water dish so you guys can see this. My water dish here, and I'm rinsing it out and then wiping it off, getting a little bit more color. Okay, only a little bit. These are medium-bodied paints. Okay, so there's a few different types. There's a soft body, medium body, and full body. And again, I'm continuing to wipe these off as I'm getting more paint colors and not getting them in the paint. You might find that you need to use more. Now that I've gotten most of them, I'm going to get a little bit of black here. And keep in mind, you really don't need a lot of black. A little bit of black goes a long way. Okay. So now that I have these, you're going to experiment with them, and you're going to be going ahead and putting a little bit down and then adding a little bit and working with it and seeing what comes up. So like I said, I added blue to that, and you can hardly see the blue at all. So what happens if I add water to it? Oh, there's some yellow that got in there. So I combined yellow and some of the blue that's in there. What does that do to it? What does that mix together to create? What shade are you creating? How do you create new colors? How do you create new shades? When you're done, don't let the paint dry on the brush. Make sure you rinse it and set it down. Maybe you want to try mixing colors. Like I said, now you see that black goes a long way. Maybe you want to take some yellow and add some yellow in there. What happens if you mix the paint on a piece of paper versus if you mix it on your palette ahead of time. So I have my blue and I have my yellow, and I don't care if you guys mix it on the palette because that's up to you. I just care that you don't mix it in here, okay? But mix it on the palette. Oh, and I have a color, and then what happens if I apply that color? What's the difference between the way I applied it here and the way I applied it here? Okay, and mark those down. Can you guys see this? I'm sorry, sometimes I'm so busy in the moment that I forget if you can see or not, so I apologize. So what happens when you do those things? And then also what different types of brushes. I've got this brush. What happens if I add white to this green, right? What hue of green is this that I'm discovering? And what tint of green? And how do I see the difference? Also, how much do I have to use? If I use a whole lot of this white and I combine it with the red, right? How much did I use? And I'm guesstimating how much I used. I think I used a little bit more white than red, but I have kind of a bright pink that I'm creating, right? And then what happens if I add a tiny bit of blue? You guys see this? Tiny bit of blue. Not gonna add much, just a little bit of blue to that pink, okay? Hardly anything. If I add a little bit more, okay? What happens if I don't mix it completely? And, right, I start to get some streaks and I can see my brush marks better, right? What happens if I add water? Okay, so there's all sorts of things that you can do to experiment with this. Also, what is the difference if I experiment on different surfaces? That could be part of your discovery. As you can see right here, there's a different look when I paint styrofoam compared to when I paint paper, right? What happens to the paper? So all of these are things that you can use, and you want to have your pencil handy so you can make observations. No need too much black, okay? Mix on palette versus mix on paper. Okay, so make these notes to yourself as you're remembering what's happening. The last thing is the ink. You're going to want to experiment with these inks. This is pigment ink, and a little bit goes a long way. You can experiment by mixing it with white. That's really how you're going to see it the best, or you can experiment by mixing it with some colors. But again, only a few drops go a long way, and discover how many drops do I need to create a consistent thing. Is it better to use this for pure blue, this cyan, or is it better to use pure blue for painting pure blue? So those are some of the things that you want to discover. And then with the brushes, how do I make dots? Oh, see what I mean here? We got to make sure. This is why we want to make sure not to leave things in the water for too long, because these bristles can come out. Okay, how do I make dots? Oh, I don't really like those dots. How do I make pure dots? Maybe I want to take my little brush and I want to try it. And if you know you're just using pure paint, you can always stick it in there. But what do I have to do to create dots versus if I go sideways on the brush, right? I have different styles of brushes here. And what do you notice the difference when you use them wet, when you use them dry? Okay, so those are some of the things that you are going to be doing. Remember, your goal is not to make beautiful artwork. Your goal is to experiment with the material. All right, and then remember to watch the video for brush care. You gotta make sure that you're cleaning it all up, including your palette, that you're wiping this all down and everything is coming off, and you're putting it in the actual dry rack. When you're done with your station, make sure you fold this, unless you're gonna keep it, of course. If this is going in, if you're gonna eventually maybe cut this and put this into your collage, then I would put your name on it and put it in the bottom drying rack so it can dry, and then next time you can cut it and attach it to your collage. But document everything into your collage, into your sketchbook, okay, so that you have it as documentation. But make sure you don't lose it. If you're done with it, you fold it in half and you throw it away so that the paint doesn't get all over everything. And then of course your station, Remember not to leave these sitting for too long, and don't leave them sitting in the water either. Watch the care video for how to take care of these brushes, okay? But when you're done with your brushes and your palette, and you bring them to the sink, oh yeah, the sponge, don't forget to try with the sponge too. All right, you'll clean that up, and again, watch the video for cleanup. And then your station, use the soapy water to clean up first, hopefully with this. If you need to, get another paper towel, okay? But make sure everything is wiped down, including the floor. Sometimes paint gets on the floor, that's just the way it is, okay? If you get anything on your clothes, dish soap, Dawn's dish soap should help. If you just put that in and you're washing your clothes with dish soap, it should come out because all of this is washable. If it dries, it's a little more tricky, but it should come out. All right, and that is the paint video. Thank you for being patient and watching the whole thing.